Shanti. May He protect us. May He sustain us. May we grow in strength together. May our study together be fruitful. And may we not hate one another. Om peace, peace, peace. Okay, good evening. We're getting very near the end of the book, and we may, in fact, finish it today or the next class. We're in Part 2, Chapter 3, so I'll read what we've covered already, and then we'll continue. So this world is like a big banyan tree that is rooted high above in Brahman and has its branches, such as men and women, animals, insects, and plants, spread out below. It, the phenomenal world, is timeless in the sense that it comes and goes again and again, like waves, in other words, in cycles. And the root of this tree is Brahman. It is pure and, they say, immortal. All the worlds, including this planet, rest on it. Nothing can surpass it. This truly is that self that Nachiketa was asking about. Whatever is in this world has come from prana. In other words, Brahman associated with Maya, its own power. Again, in prana, all this rest and functions. This Brahman is like a thunderbolt about to strike. It is a great terror. Those who know this Brahman become immortal. From fear of it, Brahman, fire gives heat. Out of terror, the sun shines. Afraid of it, Indra, Vayu, and the fifth death rush to perform their respective duties. If anyone is able to attain the knowledge of Brahman before death, he gets liberation in this very life. Otherwise, he is born again and again in this world and other worlds. Just as a clear reflection is seen in a clear mirror, so also the self is seen in a pure mind. In the world of the ancestors, you see yourself hazily, as you see things in a dream. In the world of the Gandharvas, you see the self as you see a reflection in water. In other words, again, hazily. But when you see yourself in the world of Brahma, you see it as clearly as you see light and shade. The sense organs have a separate origin in that they are products of the elements. They are active when an individual is awake. They are idle when he is asleep. A truly wise person knows that the self is independent of the sense organs, and he is therefore no longer susceptible to sorrow. The mind is superior to the sense organs. The intellect is superior to the mind. Superior to the intellect is the great self, Hiranyagarbha. Superior to the great self is the unmanifest, Avyakta. The Purusha, the cosmic self, or Brahman, is all-pervasive and formless. So there's no way of knowing it. If anyone knows it, he is liberated from the cycle of birth and death and attains immortality, even when he is alive. The cosmic self, Purusha, is not an object of our vision. No one can see it by his eyes or perceive it by any other sense organ. It reveals itself in the heart only when the mind is pure and constantly thinks on it. Having realized it properly, one becomes immortal. When the five organs of perception stop working, having merged with the mind, and the intellect too has retired from its work, that is the state scholars describe as being the highest spiritual state. According to the yogins, the state in which all the organs are at complete rest is yoga. In that state, a yoga never makes a mistake. For instance, he is not attracted by sense pleasures because he is one with the self. But this yogic state may have its fall, just as it has its rise. The self of Brahman is beyond speech and thought. The eyes and other organs cannot perceive it. Yet some people, having been inspired by the scriptures and their teachers, believe that it exists. But how can it be demonstrated to those who do not believe? So that was the first 12 verses. Now we come to verse 13. It says, first and foremost, one has to have the realization that the cosmic self, the Paramatman, exists. Next, one must try to realize the true nature of that self. Between the two categories of people, in other words, those who have the conviction that the cosmic self exists, and those who lack that conviction, the chances are that the self will reveal itself to the former. So the commentary says that first one must intellectually have the conviction that the cosmic self exists. But this is only the beginning. One has to go much further. After this conviction, one has to intensify one's spiritual efforts so that the self finally reveals itself. The revelation comes as an experience, direct and personal, and it takes place independent of the sense organs. With this experience, one realizes the true nature of the cosmic self, that the cosmic self is attributeless. So first and foremost, one has to have the realization that the cosmic self exists. You have to first have that knowledge. Now the fact is that that cosmic self, that presence of Brahman or God, is there within us all the time. It's always present within us, but yet we're simply not aware of it. It's said that all knowledge, I think Swami Vivekananda said that all knowledge is really a bringing out of something that's already known. In fact, the word education, it comes from educare, which means to draw out. And the idea, going back to Socrates and others, is that you have all knowledge within yourself, but it takes something to bring it out. And this is what is called Shravana in the scriptures, hearing the truth. Somehow, through a teacher, or through a book, or sometimes through experience, something has to trigger that knowledge, otherwise it won't come out at all. And I think I mentioned before, that my first experience, kind of into Vedanta, or one of the first experiences, was when I came across the book, How to Know God. This was back, I was in the army in Germany and all, and I found this book in the bookstore, and when I read it, it was the Yoga Aphorisms of Patanjali, and when I read it, it just struck me, oh, this is right, this is true. This is something I've known all my life, but I had never consciously thought that at all, because nothing ever triggered it. But when the timing was right, and when you come across the right source, the right book or teacher or something, then it triggers and it brings that, some of that knowledge, it brings it into your consciousness. And so the importance, see, this is the importance of all religions, is that they serve as a guide to people. They tell people that this world isn't everything, that there's a God behind it, there's some spiritual truth, reality behind it. Otherwise, the great majority of people, it never even cross their mind. You just go through your daily life, you'd be involved with your everyday affairs, and never for a moment think that there's anything else, there's anything higher than this. Now for most people, that presence of religion, that presence of teachers who are saying, there is a God who's looking after this universe, who's taking care of you, for the most, they're not overly concerned, who is God, how can I realize God, and so forth. It gives them some comfort, some solace. When they face a crisis or a tragedy or something in their life, they're able to say, well, there's somebody there, there's some higher truth. And for many people, it's just the idea that, well, when this life is over, I know this life comes to an end. When it's over, well, then I'll go to heaven. They don't know what heaven is. They don't really aren't overly concerned about spirit or anything. But at least it gives something there. Otherwise, there's nothing. And this truth, this higher truth, is communicated to people through books, through teachers, especially through a teacher who has realized some of these truths, and also when a person is kind of on the path. Sincerely, he's really kind of seriously now moving on the path. Often this knowledge or guidance, it comes through often just random experiences. That you open a book and suddenly there's the verse you needed to just kind of answer your question, or you come out, you're walking down the street, you meet somebody, he says, oh, you should go to the Vedanta Society. You never heard of the Vedanta Society, but so you say, okay, you go, and then a whole new thing opens up. When we speak of the Guru, we speak of a spiritual teacher, and particularly a Guru is somebody who's had some degree of realization. He's actually experienced some of this truth, and therefore he can communicate it to people. However, the real Guru is God himself. It's that presence of God that's within each individual that can gradually draw that individual and bring him stage by stage, step by step, bring him until he attains union with God. You know, Sri Ramakrishna, in most cases though, that presence of God within, which is there, within us closer than anything else, for the most part, that presence of God will leave us alone. As long as it says, oh, it's like Ramakrishna's parable, the children are all playing the game. They're involved in the game, so the mother says, okay, fine, they're having fun, let them play, and she goes about her housework. It's only when one of the children gets tired of the game and begins to cry for its mother, then right away the mother comes, and she takes care of the child. In that way, once God sees that we're really not one God, we're tired, of money and this and that, and all, we really want to know God, we really want to be with God, then God starts to come. And it can bring experiences from all kinds of different directions, but gradually it begins to draw the person to himself. My very first book, I mentioned this also, I think the very first book I came across that got me into kind of Eastern philosophy was a book called, I think, There Is a River. It was by Thomas Sugru. It's about Edgar Casey, who he was a psychic and used to go into trance and kind of heal people. And then one time when he was in Lexington, somebody who was a publisher, book publisher, who was more intellectual, instead of asking him for cures, he began to ask him philosophical questions. And Edgar Casey, who had come from a very fundamentalist kind of religious background, very narrow religious background, and from Kentucky, he began to talk about reincarnation and karma. And that connected with me, because the idea of reincarnation meant that your life was actually a long pageant. Normally, for most Americans, you come from a background that says you've got one life. And if you get it right, you go to heaven. But if you get it wrong, you go to hell. And most people, in one life, you may get a little better, you may get a little wiser, but not much. And so everything depends on that. You're in trouble. But in reincarnation, then suddenly everything kind of made sense. It's like you go to school, you learn a lesson, and then you come back and you learn a little better lesson, and slowly you grow, you evolve, and develop. Well, at that time, that really kind of connected with me. But what's interesting, though, is that a friend of mine, named Sue, and I was in college. I was home and she gave me this book, and she said, "Oh, you'll find it interesting." And I looked at it and said, okay, fine. I put it on a shelf. For months, I didn't think about that book. But then one morning, I was home on summer vacation from college. One morning, I woke up and I got to read that book. I had no idea what it was about or anything else. But when I read it, it just like opened a door. And that was like the first door. And then later on, I came across, Vedanta and Sri Ramakrishna and so forth. And so, but like that, there's a power within each of us. That if we let it operate, and particularly if we want it to operate, if we don't want God to bother us, if we want, oh no, I'm busy with my game, then God will leave us alone. But when we want God to operate, then that begins to function and gradually begins to draw us higher and higher to God. So that Possibility is always there as soon as you actually want it. But nobody is going to want it if the thought never crosses their mind that there's something else there. One place, Swami Vivekananda, he said that the incarnations, the God-man and the saints, the God-realized souls, is what the ones we hear about. There's a very few. He said the world has always had men of God realization, men who had realized God that we never hear about. They're sitting in a cave or just in a room somewhere or something. We're not even aware that they're existing. But he said that because these realized souls have always been there, the consciousness of all humanity has been lifted up. And without that, Swami Vivekananda said we would be animals. We would just be living our physical existence and never guessing, never thinking about anything higher. So anybody who makes spiritual progress is actually not just making it for himself, for his own salvation, but he begins to bring the light, the spiritual light begins to flow through him and flow into the world, and he doesn't have to preach or talk or write books, but it affects other people. It uplifts their consciousness. We don't realize it, but whatever we are, we project outwards. If we're filled with anger, we project that out, and we may say all the right things, be polite, be nice, but people pick up something negative about us, and it kind of repels them, and it kind of drags them down. On the other hand, when a person has begun to get the spiritual light within him, it's not just a blessing for him, but it becomes a kind of aura that affects everybody who comes into his presence, and it uplifts them. It lifts the darkness of material, it just lightens their load a little bit. So, and this is important to remember when we study this, and it talks about renunciation and how you have to realize the self and things like that. That self with a big S, that they're talking about is the self in everybody. And this is the crux of our ignorance, of all our problems, is that we think we're an ego. We think we're an individual that's separate from God and that's separate from everybody else. And then, as the Upanishad is going to say, then come desires. We say, oh, I'm this person, and I'm hungry, so I want to get this, or I want to do this, or I want to have this here. And so with desires then, we go out and we start to grab things in the world. And we see other people as a source from which we can grab something. Some pleasure, some emotional satisfaction, some money, whatever. But we're looking at the world in terms of what can it give me, and we build on that. For people who are kind of very low down in their spiritual development, this becomes like pure competition. You just shove everybody out of the way and get what you want. You're purely selfish. Then in human society, we're gradually taught, don't grab things, don't take your sister's toy. That kind of slowly we're kind of taught these things. Yeah, I remember when we were small children, sister and I, when I got to cut the cake, I would cut a great big piece for myself and a little tiny piece for my sister. And so then my mother came up with a solution, which probably all mothers figure out, is that one person got to cut the cake and the other person got to pick their piece. So then then it worked out. But basically, this is at the lower level. This we approach life with this selfish kind of grabbing stuff, and slowly and through society, we gradually learn to be unselfish. And this is like a part of a social growth, and also the beginning of kind of spiritual development. Usually, the person who's completely self-centered, completely selfish, he usually then gets married, has a family, and now his consciousness has had to expand and include some other people. Perhaps rather grudgingly, perhaps he considers the children a nuisance, but still he's got to start thinking in terms of not just me, but other people. And like that we see through society, you gradually begin to expand a little bit until you get begin to sense of the spiritual, because all of this is moving from a small, tiny particle of consciousness, which has set up barriers around itself and kept out all the whole vast universe. As those barriers gradually wear down, then gradually it begins to become aware and move into that oneness, that unity of existence. So when they're talking about spiritual practice and things, they're not saying you have to hate people, you have to hate the world, you have to reject everything. It's saying you have to eliminate your selfishness and the desires that result from that selfishness. Once you stop trying to grab things, then you begin to find yourself, oh, I'm at peace, I'm okay. I don't need anything, I'm finding, and then you start to find the resources that are there within yourself. And then everything, your very life becomes a blessing. As a human being, as an individual, we can't really do much good to the world or to anybody else. Even if we really love someone, really want to do good, we really don't have much to give. You can't give what you don't got. But the person who's learned how to make some connection, some contact with that universal self within, out of him, that universal self is able to kind of flow through and bring good to people. And so this is kind of the spiritual life. At one level, you're a good human being. You're very nice. You're learning how to be unselfish, how to be loving, how to be kind, and you're giving some happiness, some benefit to people. But when you begin to experience that there's this higher presence within, and eventually as you get in, you realize the best thing I could do for the world is to get out of the way, to let that reality, let it function, let it flow through me. And then you see, this is where kind of the miracles and the tremendous things begin to happen in your life, is when that ego, with all the barriers we've set to keep the universal self out, when those barriers are weakened gradually, we become aware of that presence, and it then begins to function and flow through us. And it's not something that we use, or that we try to make do something, even try to make bless people or cure people. It's something that uses us. And this is the true relationship, is that our individual self, what we call our individual self, is only an instrument in the hands of God. The body, the mind, the personality, all these things, these are instruments through which God is trying to manifest itself. When they take over, it's like you get into your car and it just takes off and goes where it wants to go instead of where you want to go. Then you'll have problems, and you'll probably have an accident. Back in the old cowboy shows, they always had the runaway stagecoach with a screamy lady inside, and he would go off the cliff. So like that, many people, that's their life. They're like the screamy lady, and they don't know can't control anything, and their stagecoach just goes off a cliff. And you see that in so many lives, that it's totally wrecked. And all the time, they have God with His omniscience, His power, His love. Everything is there within them, but they're not aware of it. And this is what Swami Vivekananda, what he tried to bring into the world. Every soul is potentially divine, but they don't know it. They don't realize what they are, how glorious they are, what great powers and what great kind of wonders of love and wisdom are there within. And so they're living in this kind of ignorant state. And so this is what essentially what the Upanishads are teaching. So first and foremost, you have to have the awareness, the consciousness, yes, there is something there. At first, it may be only a theory or intellectual knowledge, but at least somehow something's got to click, and you say, yes, there is something higher. But then next, one must try to realize the true nature of that self. And this then is, there comes a point in your spiritual study, your spiritual life, where you realize that I know everything I need to know, but now I've got to do it. Yeah, and that's a big transition. You know, it's one thing to read about books, to go to classes and things, but to actually kind of start the work can be difficult. And it's like scriptures, classes, things like this. They're like a map. They make it clear, and you might, okay, this is where I have to go, and this is how I get there. But reading the map doesn't take you any closer to your destination. At some point, you guys then actually begin to make the trip. And this is what, after you're convinced that this is true, after you're convinced that there's a God, that there's some higher spiritual reality, then you actually have to want to realize it, to experience it. And this, then, like I said, is for most people, religion is a kind of it's a part of their life. And maybe it's an important part of their life. They're devoted to it. They go to church every Sunday or, things, but what's really not what they're interested in. What they're interested in is what's going on in their everyday life. And religion just makes things better and kind of smoother and happier, and that's about as far as they want to go. They don't really consider, well, what is God? How do I experience God? Can I experience it? How can that be? They don't really want to know God so much as have God straighten out their life. And for most people, this is what prayer means. I've got a problem, so I go and I pray to God, God, come fix this problem. It's like, God, come wash my car, or God, mow my lawn. But we don't think about who is God, what is God. And what we don't realize is that all these prayers, oh God, give victory to my side, destroy my enemies, all these prayers, they really don't have much effect. The one prayer that does have an effect is when you say, God, let me be with you, or God, please come, let me know you. Then that has an effect, and then if God's presence starts to come into your life, then you see all your problems, things like that, gradually getting transformed. Everything is changing. And you realize that within me, there's a power that can handle all these things. That, as long as I let it function, as long as I just connect with it, then you see the results. It's like, example, you have a washing machine. You can pray over the washing machine for a century and nothing's going to happen. But as soon as you plug it in, it works. And this is the idea behind true prayer, is that we can pray, oh God, do this or do that for 1,000 years, and nothing much is going to happen. But as soon as you plug in, as soon as you connect, then God's grace begins to flow, and then you see the miracles that start to take place. So you first have to know the truth, at least be aware that there's something there, and then at some point, there has to come a point where you actually want to know God, where you actually want to experience God. And this is when you get into spirituality, when you get into true religion, is when that urge comes, that I actually want to know God, I want to have His actual presence in my life. And as this will say a little later, this is the crux of Vedanta. This is what Vedanta says, is that these high truths that they're talking about, Brahma and everything else, all of these things can be an actual experience in a person's life. And this is the whole goal. It's not going to church, not being a good person or anything else. It's ultimately to have the actual reality of God as a part of your experience. So then, as it mentioned, of the two categories of people. Now, there's some who believe are convinced there's a higher reality and some who aren't. Of those two categories, those who have the conviction that the cosmic self exists, and those who lack that conviction, the chances are that the self will reveal itself to the former. If the person doesn't believe God's there, the odds are he's not going to seek God. He's not going to, take the means to actually experience God. So now then, in verse 14, it says that when a person has all his heart's desires destroyed, he attains immortality and becomes one with Brahman in this very life. So the Katha Upanishad, again and again, says that the goal of life is to attain immortality. But how can one attain it? There are some obstacles in the path, and these obstacles are desires. A person is pushed around by his desires, and he has to get rid of them. When these desires are gone, the self reveals itself automatically. It is like removing the dirt from a mirror. When the dirt is gone, the mirror clearly reflects your face. In the same way, when your desires are gone, you recognize your true identity. You recognize that you are the self. By this recognition, you know that you are immortal and that you are none other than Brahman. You have this experience in this very life. It is a matter of discrimination and renunciation. By discrimination, you decide what is good for you and what is bad, and you renounce the bad. Then the mind becomes pure, and when this happens, the self automatically reveals itself. So it's when a person has all his heart's desires destroyed, he attains immortality and becomes one with Brahman in this very life. So Sri Ramakrishna used to always talk about renunciation and giving up desires. Now I said giving up desires, renunciation or giving up desires, it doesn't mean hating people. It doesn't mean hating the world. It doesn't mean hating your job or thinking you have to reject everything else. What it means is giving up the desires. In other words, you can perform an action, and this is the basis kind of karma yoga, is that you can perform an action with desire, thinking I'm doing this so I can get something, or you can perform it just as, okay, this is my duty, this is my job, this is an offering to God, whatever, but without any selfish desire behind the action. And this is kind of forming the crux of karma yoga, is not that you give up all work, give up all activity, but rather you do the activity with a different attitude. Instead of saying, I'm doing this so I can get this or that, you now begin to do it just as actually ultimately what becomes worship. And this is the reality. When you're seeing everything as sacred, every action is worship, then it's becoming true. It's becoming what it is. When you're seeing everything in terms of, am I going to get up the corporate ladder, am I going to get this, or am I going to get that, then your ego is kind of distorting everything and making it small, and experiencing, going through ups and downs, through good or bad. Now the problem with desire, see, and the reason why it's such an obstacle, is that desire is based on a sense of, I lack something, I'm missing something, I need something, and so I'm going to try to get it from this person, or I'm going for this job, or whatever. But I'm seeing things, and I'm feeling I'm missing something, and so I'm trying to feel that lack. But when you're kind of in proper state of mind or state of being, you don't feel the lack. When you start to get into this underlying kind of spiritual consciousness, you find you're at peace, you're filled with joy, you're completely satisfied, completely contented, and there's no sense that I need anything. It doesn't mean you have to, hate everything, because that's just as bad. And often, sometimes people on the religious path, they'll go through from swinging from desiring things. They now start to hate things, and that's just like the flip side of the same coin. But it's when you realize that I got everything, I don't need anything. Then you start to get back into your real state, your real nature of who you are. So as long as you think, as long as your attention is on getting something outside yourself that you think is going to make you happy, then you're caught up kind of in the world, and you're caught up in this false sense of identity, thinking I'm a human being and so forth. And you go through then the pairs of opposites. You go through victories, and then you're happy, or you go through kind of defeats, and then you're unhappy. And like that, that's the human state, is kind of going up and down. But when you let go of desires and say, I need to go out and grab that, and begin to come back within yourself, then you begin to discover that, oh, I'm fine. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. The first sign is that you can enjoy the things of the world, but if they're not there, you don't miss them. No, the worst part about desire is that we depend upon it. We say, I need this person to give me emotional support, or I need this job to give me a good salary, and if I'm fired or if laid off, then I'm destroyed. And like that, we're depending on something outside of ourselves to make us happy, to give us satisfaction. But when we start to get our balance back a little bit, then we realize that things of the world are fine, they're good, I enjoy them, no problem, but I don't need them. If they're there, fine. If they're not there, I don't miss them. In my life, I use the example of TV. If TV's there, I'll tend to sit and watch it, and just hours will go away. But if TV's not there, I don't miss it at all. And I'm very lucky, probably, that I don't have a TV. So otherwise, you think, 50 years of watching TV, what have you got? You can talk about all the sitcoms and some things, but really, it's not very productive. So like that, it's when you really you have it, and desire can become tremendously intense. It can become jealousy, it can become all kinds of very powerful, very destructive emotional things. But when you start, the first thing usually that a person will notice when they start to meditate is that they just start to feel calm and peaceful. They don't feel ecstasy or visions or anything else, but at first they'll just start to feel more in balance. And that is kind of the first step, because as you start to get balance, it means you've started to draw back a little bit from always grabbing everything. I remember one of the first things Swami Varadananda said to me when I came. He said, our mother shows us pictures and we try to grab them. And this is what human life is. We see pictures, we see this world, and then we try to keep grabbing it. And in the process, we get so caught up in it that we don't remember anything else. We're not aware anymore of who we really are. And so by eliminating desire, the sense of needing other things, then gradually you start to move back into yourself. When you start to move back into yourself, you start to become aware of the what Browning called the imprisoned splinter. Start to become aware of what's actually there. Then instead of trying to get things from other people, from the world, you begin to give things. You realize, oh, God's infinite power. Everything is here. And it's ready to flow out. And this is really the true spiritual life, is to try to realize the presence of God within, and then to let that flow out to everybody, not just your friends or family or things, but to everything in the universe. You send that, because the whole universe is standing on a kind of a infinite love. And so that's what you're trying to do. As long as you're driven by desires, other people sense that. when you're trying to get something from somebody else, they sense it, and there's barriers then set up. Even in very close relationships, there tend to be barriers. You know, that the person is trying to get something. This ego is trying to get something from that ego. But as you begin to move more into the unity of things, into the sense of being, okay, I'm one with everybody, that sense of conflict, of barriers and separation, that gradually dies away. People sense that there's no danger in you, that you're not after anything, that you're you know, anyone who gives you simple, open friendship without any strings attached, you know, it becomes an attractive person. Whereas if somebody's always trying to manage you, trying to get something out of you, then you don't feel comfortable when you're with that person. So it's when a person has all his heart's desires destroyed, he attains immortality and becomes one with Brahman in this very life. We tend to think, as we're on, you know, kind of on the spiritual path or meditating or something, we tend to think in terms of becoming a better person. You know, I've got a lot of vices, I've got a lot of things I need to correct and things I need to improve, and so we're struggling along. And we have the sense, okay, I'm gradually, each day I'm getting better, I'm getting, you know, a little happier and a little more virtuous and so forth. And some days we kind of fall down. So like that, it's a progressive thing. But actually, that's fine as far as your kind of individual evolution of things goes. You're slowly kind of progressing. But in terms of realization, when they speak of realization, it's all or nothing. Because realization is not a case of this individual becoming a better person. It's a case of the consciousness here waking up and realize I'm Brahman, I'm God, I'm with God, God's with me, I'm the children of immortal bliss, this is who I am, this is what I am. That comes only when there's awakening. And all of a sudden you may have been a total failure in your life here, but as soon as you wake up, you know, that was a dream. It's like you can have a really terrible nightmare, or you can have a pleasant dream, whatever, but within that dream, you know, you're trying to escape from the tiger, and no matter what you do, you can't escape. But as soon as you wake up, then it was a dream. It wasn't real. Well, there's a state of waking up from the waking state, where you realize, oh, I'm spirit. I'm eternal spirit. I'm with God, right? That's my nature. When you wake up from a dream, you become a different people, a different person, and you are living in a different reality. When you were dreaming and asleep, that dream was your world, and you took that as reality and experienced it. When you wake up, then you suddenly realize, oh, well, that dream, that was not real, but now I'm awake, and now I know what's real. And the same way, there can be a spiritual awakening, where a person wakes up and realizes, oh, I'm not that human being at all. I'm not that person who's got all kinds of problems or limitations or difficulties. I'm one with Brahman. And then you begin to live, even in this world, even in this dream, you live, but still knowing that it's only a dream. That always you're with God. That's always your Atman, always your spirit. You know that, and then kind of the dream or the show, it goes on, but you're not lost in it anymore. You're not asleep anymore. Now you're awake. And this is what the kind of realized souls are. To appearances, they look like everybody else. You know, they have arms and legs and clothes and everything else, but inside they're completely different. And just like in the Gita, when Arjuna and Krishna were talking, Arjuna represented the ordinary human being who was seeing things as they appear to be, seeing the dream, seeing this great battle about to come, and getting totally disturbed and distraught over it. Krishna looked exactly like any other human being. He ate meals, he walked and talked and did things, everything human beings do. In appearance, he was the same as everybody else, but inside, in his consciousness was the awareness of God. And he saw that beyond the appearance, beyond this apparent world, this dream world that's there is the reality of Brahman. And he was consciously, that's what he was. And so this is what Vedanta, what the Upanishads are trying to bring a person to, is that awareness. Oh, you wake up from the dream and you'll know that you are a Brahman, that you don't need anything, you're not lacking anything, you're one with the whole universe. And but as long as we shut out, as long as we stay asleep, as it were, then we'll be in our dream and we will experience sometimes good, sometimes very good, and also sometimes bad. But always in a very small, kind of limited way, we experience a little bit. But then when a person wakes up, he discovers that the whole infinite reality of God is there as the reality of his being, but that comes only when he wakes up from the belief that, okay, I'm this little person here. It's only when that's let go of that the higher consciousness comes. And then when he realizes that self, that divine presence within, he knows that it's that same presence is within everybody else too. And he can't say, oh, I'm special, I'm this great spiritual teacher, and you're just a student, But he realizes that the one self is there within everybody else. And a person who is operating from the basis of that one self, of identity with the one self, can't do harm to anybody else. Doesn't need anything from anybody else. He doesn't want to grab anything. It's like a mother's love for her child. She doesn't say, what is that child going to do for me? Well, real mothers kind of do. But she just gives love, And this is what eventually we're all trying to develop. So as long as a person has desires, he's pushed around by those desires. They drive you here and there, and they don't give you any rest. They don't give you any peace of mind. There's always a sense of I need something. And in strong desires, like particularly say drug addictions, a person will go out in a blizzard in order to get his drug, or to get, because the desire is so strong. A person will face almost anything, any kind of sacrifice, any kind of suffering, if the desire is strong enough. The sense of, I've got to have this. But when the desire is not there, then peace, tranquility, and just gradually happiness returns to our being. And we realize, oh, I'm fine. I don't need anything. So, Sri Ramakrishna gave the example of the kite. The kite is a bird, like a hawk, I think, in India, and it caught a fish. And you remember that then it caught the fish, and once it caught the fish, all the crows came. And India's got the most intelligent crows in the world. I see they just are really kind of pushy, but they're really intelligent. So all the crows began to attack the kite. And it was flying this way, it was flying that way, trying to escape, but the crows kept attacking it wherever it went. And then it dropped the fish. And now all the crows, they went after the fish. And now the kite realized, oh, all this trouble was over the fish. As soon as that was gone, then everybody left. So you're trying to make a fortune in the world, but other people are trying to make a fortune, and other people are trying to rob your fortune, and always there's a battle. I forget his name now. The one who started Standard Oil. Anyway, one of the big robber barons back in the beginning, he was at his big mansion that he had become, and he got word that he'd been hit by an antitrust suit by the government. And so he just stood by the mantle, brooding for a while. And then he said, life is just one thing after another. And like this is what you find in the world. You think, oh, I want to be Emperor of China. But then you find there's nothing but problems. Nothing but people attacking you, nothing but politics and all kinds of things. And so like that we think, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And we find that then all these crows come and start to attack us, and we spend our lives battling with the crows. But then when you let go of the fish, when you say, okay, I don't care, I don't need anything, I'm not worried, I don't lack anything, then you find, oh, I'm happy. I may not be rich, or I may not be important with things, but I'm happy, and I have everything I need. Then you find peace of mind and contentment and tranquility. And then, as you go deeper, if God wants to make you an Emperor of China, He will. And you'll be the best Emperor China ever had, because you're connected with God. So in other words, when we truly have got ourselves together, we'll find that what expresses to us is just the right thing for us as our particular instrument, with our particular nature and talents and so forth. It can flow freely through it, and we'll find that God will bring, when we stop trying to make things happen, stop trying to force things to be the way we want it, and begin to kind of leave things in God's hands, we see that what begins to come is whatever is the best for us. If we just look at human parents, we look how much concerned they are for the good of their child. They just want the child to be happy, and they go through all kinds of sacrifices and everything, because their only concern is that I want the child to be happy. Now, if you see that even in human relationship, and just think that, well, God, the infinite God of this universe, He's my parent, He's the one who created me, He's the one who's taking care of me, then we realize that we can afford to surrender. To say, okay, God, you do what you think's best. Don't, instead of advising God and saying, oh God, you should go fix that person over there or do this, instead, when you begin to relax and say, okay, God, you do as you will, then you'll see that things start to unfold in the best possible way. Okay, so we'll go one more verse, 15. It says, when in this very world the mind gets rid of all its vagaries, which are products of ignorance, the mortal man begins to feel he is immortal. This is the message of the Vedanta scriptures. There can be nothing higher than this. So man's trouble is with his desires. They never let him be in peace. If one desire is fulfilled, another soon takes its place, and they keep multiplying. These desires together constitute our bondage. We are like a larva, caught within a cocoon of its own making. These desires arise from our ignorance of our real identity. We think we are the body, and all of our activities center around it. The body is, however, a superimposition. Somehow or other, we have to detach ourselves from it. We have to remind ourselves all the time that our real self is ever free without any entanglements. It is supreme and not subservient to anything. It is the self of all. It is in everything, in everybody. It is all. There can be no sense of want in it. Our desires are all due to ignorance, and the best way to tackle them is to uproot them totally. If we can get rid of our desires, we will be free in this very life. Because of our desires, we are born again and again, so if there are no desires, there will be no more birth and death. This is what is called immortality. And the whole book, as you remember, is about the question of immortality. And Nachiketa went to Yama, the god of death, and he wanted to know, does man exist after death or not? And then the Yama began teaching him. Now, immortality, we know, almost all religions teach that your soul is immortal. And for most people, this means that this kind of person, it will continue. It'll go to a higher realm. It'll go to heaven, and it will continue to exist even after the body dies. But this is not immortality. All of these heavens, and in Hinduism, they have the idea of heaven. That there's plenty of heavens, but they're all temporary states. A soul leaves this body, leaves this particular life, it goes to some heavenly realm, it enjoys things there, is happy there for some time, but then again, it comes back and is born again. Now, immortality is not this relative immortality of the jiva or the soul. Immortality means realizing that you are the immortal Brahman, that you are that which exists by its very nature, absolutely, without any possibility of non-existence. That's your real self. The personal self it comes and goes. It changes form. We may be a man in one life, a woman in the next life. We may be a king in one life, a beggar in another life. Like the experiences, the sense of our personal identity, it always changes. And whatever sense of identity we have now, based on this particular body and our mind and so on, it eventually changes and then evolves into something else. But underlying that personal self, that personal state of consciousness is the consciousness, which is the source of everything. And when a person reaches that, when he experiences that, then he becomes truly immortal. Because that nothing can affect. It's like waves form in the ocean. Waves come and go, but the ocean is always there. And when they speak of immortality, it's the immortality of Brahman. They have spiritualism where people have seances and they talk to somebody's grandmother or something like that. And these things are true, can be true as far as they go, but they're not kind of the highest truth. In other words, people, depending on the state of your consciousness now, you'll tend to carry that same state into your heavenly realm, except you'll be a little more nicer place and all. But then, and you'll bring it back, depending on what your desires are, you bring it back into your next life, where you can express, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And but when the desires aren't there, and you become aware that your Brahman, which doesn't need anything, this is the true immortality. Then you don't have to take individual. You don't have to separate from Brahman, become an individual in order to fulfill your desires. You know, I'm with God, and I can be with God, and I can stay with God. If you come back voluntarily. It's like a person has to go to school until he graduates. He has to keep coming back until he graduates. Then, if he wants, he can go on to graduate courses. He can go on to kind of higher level school, or he can become a teacher. But otherwise he's free. He can go off and do whatever he wants. He's not bound, caught up. And so, in our samsara, driven by our desires and so forth, we're caught up in the process. And we have to keep coming back into the world and slowly evolving towards union with God. But when we attain mukti, we attain liberation, then it's like we've graduated now, and like I say, if we want, we can go on and study some more, go through higher lives, or come back as a teacher, as an instrument, a servant of God, to do God's work. Now, all that is possible, but it's now voluntary. It's not something we have to do. So we'll pick up this verse in next class. So any questions on anything so far? Okay. So then, now this Saturday, Swami Varadananda, he is going to give the talk on Eternal India over at the Hindu temple at 11:30. And then on Sunday, he's giving the talk here on meditation, according to yoga aphorisms. And also we're having a special meeting, gathering of the volunteers. Hopefully they're going to do some presentations, some videos or things, or pictures from the Chicago calling. We're also going to ask people for their feedback, any suggestions people might have, and so forth. And then we give everybody lunch and just kind of express our gratitude. And then we're probably going to get 60 people. Everybody is, a lot of people are coming. So this is one of the special things about Chicago Calling, was so many volunteers came out. And we must have 80 or 90 altogether. And they were so happy to do it, and particularly the host of the Swamis, and they were all very happy. And the Swamis too, were very happy with their host. So everybody had a good experience. So we'll have that meeting. Then later on in the month, we will have Shusharte Devi Puja. It's going to be on Sunday, the 22nd at 10:30 in the morning. And the actual date this year ended up as Christmas Eve, as the 24th. And I think we put out an announcement that both we'd have on the same day, but we decided it'd be too difficult. So Shusharte Devi Puja will celebrate on the 22nd at 10:30 in the morning. Then the Christmas Eve Puja it'll be 6:30 on December 24th. I think that's a Wednesday or something. So those are coming up. And that's about it. So next Friday we'll be having our class, and maybe we'll come very close to finishing the book.
14th of December will be the Ramdam.
Oh yeah, there'll be the Ramnam. Yeah, so that'll be this coming Saturday. Not this Saturday. Next Saturday will be the 14th. Yeah. Okay. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurmam Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Om peace, peace,